Kwon, and it's good to have you with us. The Blue House has been trying to get North Korean leader Kim Jong-un to visit Seoul before the end of the year, as invited by President Moon Jae-in at the Inter-Korean Summit in September. But the presidential office has confirmed that there is still no word from the North on whether Kim will take up the offer, and with each passing day, it looks less and less likely it'll be happening. We'll look at the latest on this situation later in the programme, but first, we start with our other headlines of the day by turning to Devin Whiting at the News Centre. Devin.
Hi, Jang-ho. Over the weekend, the South Korean parliament passed a government budget for next year, and despite the deal coming after the legal deadline and some cuts made to it, President Moon Jae-in said he's glad it was finally approved. Take a listen.
예산은 국민의 삶과 직결됩니다. 이제부터는 정부의 책임입니다. 예산이 국민의 삶 속으로 제때 제대로 흘러갈 수 있도록 기재부와 각 부처에서 집행 계획을 철저히 수립해야 할 것입니다.
The president was speaking in a meeting with his top aides. He said the 2019 budget is a good reflection of the government's philosophy of creating a prosperous and inclusive nation by expanding the social safety net, pursuing job creation and innovative growth, by building smart industry complexes, also by raising household incomes to improve overall quality of life. President Moon also said the passage of the budget bill enabled the government to repay $3.6 billion worth of national debt early this year using excess tax revenue. According to the president, it's the earliest and biggest debt repayment the government's ever made. Next year's budget includes defense spending to the tune of more than $40 billion, and at 8.2%, it's the biggest annual increase in defense spending in years, and comes despite the recent thaw in tensions with North Korea. Our Defense Ministry correspondent Park Ji-won has the details.
The South Korean government is hiking its national defense budget by 8.2% to about $42 billion next year. It's the biggest yearly expansion in the defense budget since 2008 and almost double the average annual increase of 4.4% seen from 2010 to 2017. The Ministry of National Defense says it received the same amount the government requested earlier this year, but some readjustments within the budget were made by lawmakers during the deliberation process. The ministry added the approval shows the National Assembly's firm support for a strong national defense posture. The biggest chunk of the defense budget, some $28 billion, is for the maintenance of troops and military assets, a hike of 5.7% from the previous year. The ministry aims to use the funds to make the armed forces smarter and more efficient. It will do so by improving training methods as well as upgrading uniforms and combat gear to bring them in line with cutting-edge military technology. Troops will also get more medical support, receive better training, and living conditions in barracks will be enhanced. Around $14 billion will be spent on the development and improvement of defense capabilities, such as the acquisition of state-of-the-art weaponry like aircraft and naval destroyers. This category saw a more than 13% increase compared to the last budget. About $4.5 billion will be spent on establishing the three-pronged military strategy to counter North Korean threats as well as future unknown threats. They are namely the Kill Chain Preemptive Strike System, the Korean Air and Missile Defense System, and the Korea Massive Punishment and Retaliation Strategy. Another $4.7 billion will go towards strengthening the command control system in line with preparations for the transfer of wartime operational control from Washington to Seoul. About $9 million has been allocated for the implementation of the Inter-Korean military agreement, such as the removal of some frontline guard posts in the demilitarized zone. Another $10 million has been set aside for projects linked to the recovery of Korean war remains. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
South Korean officials and experts left Seoul this morning for North Korea, where they'll be for 3 days working on inter-Korean forestry projects. They're traveling via Beijing and will arrive in Pyeongyang on Tuesday. They're following up on a trip last month by South Korean officials to the border town of Kaesong, where they delivered pesticides and did pest control work. Seoul's Unification Ministry says the group will see how the chemicals have been distributed and used and will visit tree nurseries and factories that make forestry equipment. They'll also have working-level discussions with their North Korean counterparts to carry out what was agreed at the forestry talks in late October. Today, December 10th, is Human Rights Day, an occasion observed around the world. At a ceremony this morning in Seoul, President Moon Jae-in said human rights are about accepting differences and interacting with others to maintain balance. President Moon also said that South Korea, as a nation that's endured colonization, dictatorship, and war, has an unparalleled level of human rights. But he stressed that more work needs to be done. Here's the president.
평화를 통해 인권이 보장되고 인권을 통해 평화가 확보되는 것입니다. 한반도에서 냉전의 잔재를 해체하고 항구적 평화를 정착시키는 것은 우리 민족 모두의 인권과 사람다운 삶을 위한 것입니다.
President Moon, after the late president, Roh Moo-hyun, is just the second sitting president to attend the event, and he said he hopes to realize democracy, human rights, peace, and prosperity, which he said will provide hope for the world. Now, a little more on Human Rights Day. The International Declaration of Human Rights was passed 70 years ago today by the UN. Our Oh Se-young takes a closer look at the document and its significance here in South Korea, where human rights have advanced steadily over the years.
A photo exhibition in Seoul for International Human Rights Day shows the 70-year-old history of human rights in South Korea.
There were various cases of human rights abuses carried out by authorities, but we also saw the spirit of the Korean people try and overcome these cases. In the April 19th revolution, the June democracy movement, and recently the candlelight rallies that oust President Park Geun-hye. We try to show these different aspects.
The International Declaration of Human Rights was adopted on December 10, 1948, by the United Nations General Assembly, calling for equal rights to life, freedom of expression and religion. Over the decades, South Korea has ratified various UN conventions that embody the spirit of the declaration. After breaking free from brutal Japanese occupation and a series of authoritarian governments, the country has seen vast improvements in civil and political rights. However, amid the ongoing Me Too movement, the rise of hate crimes around the world, and issues concerning minorities in Korea, human rights experts in Seoul discussed ways to deal with modern challenges.
Nowadays, the paradigm is changing. It's from civil and political right to ESCL, economic, social, and cultural right, especially discrimination issues. Discrimination against women, against children, against LGBT people, against social minorities. Because these days, the Korean situation is critically weak in terms of social polarization, economic polarization between the have and the have-nots.
International observers have called for a stronger legal framework to support universal human rights values.
The groundwork is there in South Korean law also. And one example I'd like to refer to, if possible, is the recent ruling on November 1 at the Supreme Court, which acquitted a conscientious objector. A reference made by 3 judges was to emphasize that under Article 6 of the South Korean Constitution, international treaties are legally binding domestically. So taking this precedent forward, I think it's very important that we move to ensure that all human rights are protected.
Looking ahead to 2030, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals envision a world of universal respect for human rights and dignity, justice, equality and non-discrimination. Oh Se-young, Arirang News.
I'm Devin Whiting, and those are your news headlines.
South Korea's presidential office revealed over the weekend that there is still no word from Pyeongyang about a visit by Kim Jong-un to Seoul. However, a senior official says they are still doing what they can to prepare while they wait for any further developments. Our Blue House correspondent Shin Se-min has the details.
South Korea, still waiting, says there's nothing to announce yet. The president's top press secretary said Sunday in a text message to poll reporters that there appear to be no signs of progress regarding a possible visit to Seoul by North Korea's Kim Jong-un. The same day, the president's spokesperson Kim said the administration has been preparing and is leaving all the possibilities open. But he said nothing has been decided and that Seoul has no intention of rushing because a visit by Kim needs to be considered in every aspect. There's been intense speculation about whether Kim will actually make his way down south this month, a trip that would be a first for a North Korean leader. And local reports have claimed that Kim could be planning a 3-day stay in Seoul and that South Korean officials are busy making hush-hush preparations. The top office, however, has flat out denied such reports while saying that it's leaving all the doors open for Kim to come before the year's end or early in the new year. A senior official at the presidential office said the Blue House proposed no specific date to Pyongyang for Kim's visit and that while it's doing all it can in terms of preparation, it cannot do anything concrete since there's no way to predict what'll happen. The official added that communications between Seoul and Pyongyang have not been cut off. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Now for a further look at where we stand with this situation concerning Kim Jong-un's visit to Seoul, we have with us Professor Min Jong-un from the Korean National Diplomatic Academy. It's good to have you on the show.
Yeah, my pleasure.
So to summarize, the Blue House has said that there's been currently no word from North Korea on the invitation for Kim to visit Seoul. But they also went on to say that there is no rush, there's no need for a rush, but that the possibility remains open. But it seems to me that the presidential office is trying to now lower expectations, whereas previously they had been trying to raise it. Do you see it that way?
Well, I think that it reflects the current situation of the matter. The Blue House official said there has been no contact from North. And so what Chongade is not willing to the push or hurry means that the Blue House doesn't want the push North Korea to make a decision to visit Seoul as early as possible. The Chongwade or the Blue House clarified what is important is not a meeting date, but the result. But I think that the Chongwade will continue to make a preparation for a possible visit and is waiting for the Chairman Kim's decision. So it all depends on the situation is ongoing.
So it seems to me that a lot of these rumours of reports about the preparations for this visit were because there is so much to prepare because of this logistical reasons about Kim Jong-un coming. I mean, what are some of the concerns that the Blue House has?
Well, you know, I believe that the Blue House has got lots of their concerns and lots of scenarios to prepare for the visit because it's all new for the history of the country, and even except for the main topics of the summit, the South Korean government is likely to care much about various things. Among them, I think that the security or the safety of the Chairman Kim is the most important consideration during his visit to Seoul. For example, for the hotel, Chairman Kim will stay during his visit to Seoul, 2 hotels. You know, there have been lots of the rumors about that, but the 2 hotels, specifically the first Walkway Hotel, where the North Korean delegates stayed in February this year, and Grand Hyatt Hotel, where the U.S. president stayed, they have been talked much. And during the stay, Chairman Kim will also visit the various places, including the industrial facilities that can show the South Korea's economic achievements and possibly Hanla Mountain. You know, and they think about how difficult it could be to secure the Chairman Kim's security in open places like that. But anyway, it is known that the South Korean government is making concerted efforts to secure Chairman Kim's safety successfully during his visit. Many things to do for the South Korean government.
So South Korean Blue House seems to be actively preparing for this visit, but some might question why make these preparations now before the North has even replied that he will decide to come? I mean, why is President Moon pushing ahead with this, the preparations? I mean, what is it just a calculated risk or some tactic to put pressure on Kim Jong-un to move negotiations forward?
But as I mentioned earlier today, our government, the Moon government, doesn't want to push North Korea to make the decision to visit Seoul, because if the South Korean government pushes North Korea for the visit, the North Korea would be more hesitant to make a decision, because the why the Chairman Kim doesn't make a decision at this point could have several the reasons for him, but we can talk that those kind of things later today. But there could be various reasons why the Moon government's Moon administration is preparing for the possible budget. But among them, I think that it is related to what kind of the behavior of North Korean government or the Chairman Kim or his predecessors showed in the past. You know, in terms of the talks with the South Korean government, North Korean government or the top leaders, they didn't want to announce or just let the South Korean government know that in advance, some kind of the time ahead of the event, and instead they waited for the last moment and just let South Korean government know about some kind of the upcoming events at the very last moment. So the South Korean government and the Moon administration knows that kind of the behavior fully. So that's why the Moon administration is preparing the possible visit this time, although North Korea remains silent.
So why do you think North Korea is remaining silent? I mean, what are they hesitating, or are they? Is this a tactic to try and make these South Koreans wait? I mean, what do you think is going through Kim Jong-un's mind right now?
Well, I think that Chairman Kim is hesitant because it's not clear what kind of the achievements he can get from the visit. You know, of course, becoming the first North Korean top leader who has an official visit to the South could have some the great meaning itself. But such a political meaning could not be enough. And the Chairman Kim want to get some substantial achievements from the visit. Now, as you know, recently the North Korea has been focused on relieving academic sanctions imposed to it, and possibly the Chairman Kim want to get some the meaningful results from from his visit to Seoul. But the relieving academic sanctions go with the North Korean denuclearization measures. And North Korea and the U.S. have shown the very different arguments about that, and has been very slow to make progress about that. So, in terms of such kind of the concerns, it seems that the Chairman Kim is taking some time, and much time before he makes a decision.
Most North Korea analysts I've spoken to, and others seem to have spoken to as well, say that it's not going to happen this year because Kim Jong-un just doesn't have enough to gain out of a trip to Seoul. Are you on that same boat?
Well, it's not clear when the Chairman Kim will visit Seoul, because as I mentioned earlier today, it all depends on whether or not the North Korean leader Chairman Kim to make a decision about the denuclearizing itself. And recently it is reported that U.S. could take corresponding measures, such as declaration to end the Korean War, and establishing a liaison office in Pyeongyang, and possibly a way of relieving academic sanctions. Is not exactly the relieving U.S. sanctions or the UN sanctions. We can find the alternatives to that. And the U.S. could take such the corresponding measures if North Korea makes significant progress in terms of denuclearizing itself, such as declaration and the verification of Yongbyon nuclear facilities, and possibly dismantling some of its ICBMs or nuclear warheads. So I think that Chairman Kim's decision to take such denuclearization the measures will be followed by his decision to visit Seoul. So we need to wait and see. And there's no time limit about his decision to do that.
But do you think there still remains a possibility that he could visit before the end of the year, even without perhaps making these decisions? Is there any reason for him to visit?
Well, but it all depends on the relationships or the relations between the denuclearization measure and the U.S. corresponding measures. But think about the remaining time by the end of this year. We just left 20 more days to go before the end of this year. So physically, technically, it would not be easy for Chairman Kim to make a decision to visit Seoul in terms of the security, logistics, and other things. But still, as Blue House said, there is still open the possibility, but we need to wait and see. And by the end of this year, if the Chairman Kim visits South Korea, it would be great. But in the early next year, sometime in the early next year, would be fine for the visit.
From what I hear, those officials at the presidential Blue House are making sure that they don't go anywhere too far for the Christmas holidays as well, because they might have to be busy. And that same applies for us as well, unfortunately. Anyway, let me move on to some other developments with North Korea before we go. So North Korean Foreign Minister Ri Yong-ho visited Beijing last week, and he met with Chinese President Xi Jinping. Now, North Korean state media reported that they reaffirmed their bilateral ties and didn't reveal much else. But what do you think they would have talked about at this visit? I mean, what would Ri Yong-ho have to say to President Xi about the current situation in North Korea?
Well, basically, when Ri Yong-ho met the Chinese official, he tried to request China to support what North Korea wants from North Korea-U.S. negotiations. But I think that the current, the recent North Korea-China talks represents that North Korean diplomacy resumes its moves. In terms of the impasse, impasse of the North Korea, the U.S. negotiations, the North Korean diplomacy remained almost silent for the past 2 weeks. So what the North Korean diplomacy resumes means that possibly North Korea has finished its internal discussions over its denuclearization measures and U.S. corresponding measures and resumes its diplomatic moves for its decisions. So, what the recent North Korea-China talks shows that North Korea is ready to move forward in terms of the denuclearization itself and receiving corresponding measures from the United States. And what the North Korea did in the past, before the second summit, or the first summit with the United States in June this year, and the North Korea leader Chairman Kim met the President Xi in support to get the support from China before he got the summit with the United States. So possibly the recent the North Korean and China talks represents or replicate that kind of movement, and it shows that the North Korea is ready to move forward and ready to talk to the United States for the denuclearization measures.
I mean, but still, this relationship between China and North Korea, I mean, how has it changed over the last few months, as in, like, with this situation with North Korea and the US and denuclearization? I mean, where does it go from here then?
Well, so as you mentioned, possibly the North Korea, the China, the relations could be changed for the past several months, but still, basically, the two-country relations has not been changed, I think. Still China wants North Korea to be a buffer zone in terms of the blocking the U.S. the troops on the Korean Peninsula or the right in front of the Chinese continent, and still the North Korea still wants China to stand behind the country when the North Korea talked to the United States. So still the two countries got some kind of the interest that they have in common. But in terms of the strong leadership of the President Trump, that he didn't want China to stand behind the North Korea. And as he mentioned in June this year, so China was a little careful in terms of the officially helping or assisting North Korea in terms of the relieving sanctions and other things. So the China and the North Korea has got a little bit different interest in terms of the surrounding the countries on the Korean Peninsula. But basically, still, both sides want the other one. So the China welcomes the North Korea's diplomatic moves and welcomed the other diplomatic talks recently.
That's where we'll have to wrap things up. But thank you for coming in, Professor, as always, and sharing your thoughts with us.
Okay, thank you.
And that is where we will close out our show. But do stay tuned for our later newscasts for the latest updates. Thank you for watching and hope you can join us again next time. Goodbye.